You want to just get us started on maybe just how to go about giving somebody an email or calling somebody about booking your band at the RME, and we'll just start with this place here. So.
All right, hey everybody. Like Alan said, I'm Kate Dale. I'm the entertainment director here at RME, which is a fancy title for I get to book the bands here at RME and at Redstone Room. I've been here for 12 years, but doing talent buying for about 9 or 10 of those years, I think. And I kind of learned on the fly. My predecessors kind of taught me what to do, and you kind of learn from experience in this business, so that's what a lot of it is. There's probably a lot of you here who I see a lot of fellow musicians that play in town a lot, but maybe you guys don't go on the road a lot. It's easy, it may seem easier to book for a lot of the local bands locally, because you're like, hey, hey Ribco, hey RME, we're in the Quad Cities based band, it's easy to find the contacts for that, but like how do you, go about like contacting a venue that you've never played before, or a market you've never played before, which can be really hard. I probably get somewhere on average about 50 to 60 inquiries per week to come play here, so there's a lot to filter through. And I wanted to point out a couple of things, like the reality is that I'm not going to listen to every single band. I try to, but part of the band's responsibility is to make sure that I have the information to find out who you are, right? You'd be unbelievably surprised about the number of inquiries I get that they don't tell me their band's name, I don't have a link to their music, I just wanted to throw out a couple like do's and don'ts for those of you that maybe are kind of new to this. So do be professional and polite. It's good to acknowledge who you're talking to if you can find that information. Use good grammar, that kind of stuff. You need to have your links ready to go. If you don't have your music online, get something online, even if it's 1 or 2 tracks. There's so many platforms out there now that are easy to do for that. Sonic Bids, SoundCloud, Spotify even. And keep it short and sweet. If you put your entire life story into the email and it's 2 pages long, I'm probably not going to read through all that. But the links that you include will be there if I want to dig in deeper, right, and know more about your band. But to give you guys some examples, I dug up some don'ts. And I'm going to keep these anonymous. But here, I'm going to keep them anonymous, but I'm going to read you just a few quick ones. I'm not going to take up a lot of time, but hey, it's so-and-so from so-and-so band. We've been to your establishment many times and enjoy the atmosphere. There are people in this band that think their gay phase is over, but let's talk about it. We are the most angry mongoloids this side of the Milky Way. If you want it brought, make sure you get it. Keep it moist. Name. What is that? I don't know what that is. That doesn't give me any information about you. You're rude. You're not giving me anything to use. And then 2 days later, when I didn't reply, followed up with a very aggressive email of basically, I'm not going to read it, but it's going to be basically, I'm going to keep sending you emails until you book me. But you didn't give me any information to book you, so how am I supposed to do that? So, make sure you have your information there. Be polite. Non-verbal communication is hard enough to read, especially if you don't know the person. So know your audience, know what you're looking for. A good 1-page, very brief bullet point email with some links and a very brief description about who you are will go a long way. And if people don't get back to you right away, if a buyer doesn't get back to you, just know that they're not purposely ignoring you. It's okay to follow up. Like a week or 2 weeks later, if you don't hear anything, that's a good amount of time to follow up and be like, hey, just want to make sure that you got this, kicks you to the top of their inbox. Because, like I said, if you get 50 inquiries a week, sometimes you just don't get to it right away, but the reminder to push it up is really good. So, there's me.
Are we going to so Joe, I noticed that you attack some areas. So when you're going out on the road, do you go just anywhere that has a gig for you, or do you try to make sure that your area is good for you and that you can make sure you always get back to those places to keep the fans together?
Great question, Al. Sorry, we're going to steer off the road for a second. First, I just want to say thanks to everyone coming out. Thanks to Kate and Al and you guys for being a part of this. I think it's really cool because we have 3 different facets of the same thing we're trying to do. We got Kate from the venue side, me from the artist side, and then Sean right there in the middle is doing both. He's an artist and he books for a venue and a festival. So that's really cool to get these 3 different perspectives. Just like Kate said, I also didn't have like a roadmap or anyone to go by. I kind of wung it, and until I was able to figure certain things out, it took a long time, a lot of mistakes. But that's how you learn. So I also do a really crazy thing where every weekend I do a different lineup. So I think in some ways that affords me a couple of luxuries traveling out of town. Like you were saying, how do I choose or know where to go? A lot of times you don't know where to go. We just have this idea in our heads of, I want to be in a touring band, I want to play all over the country, and then boom, we go, and everything's great. Everything's not great. But if you love it, you're going to keep doing it, even if you're not so successful at it. So you have to try to find the places where you might find some success. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but let me try to explain. So when you're starting out, your first goal has to be, I got to be able to bring some people out in my hometown. If you can't, let's just throw out 30 to 50 people. If you can't bring out 30 to 50 people in your hometown, you're not really going to get a gig anywhere else. Unless you're like maybe one of the most virtuosic musicians out there, you got to have a bargaining chip. And it kind of is a little disheartening because we all get into music because we love it. It's a passion. It's something we enjoy so much that we want that to be the focus. But if you're playing out in bars and restaurants and venues, it's a business. So you have to find a way to translate that passion into the business. Now, it doesn't mean you have to become a businessman, but you have to have a bargaining chip. So if I can bring 30 to 50 people out to your bar or venue or restaurant, then you're probably going to have me back. So that's goal number 1, right? We can get in the door in our hometown or wherever we're at locally. Now, if you want to start moving out into other cities and other venues, it's good to try and find another band who you can team up with. You go play with them, hook up with some of their friends, they come play by you, and then that way your little circle can start spreading. So what I've done a little bit with my band is tried to hack the system by bringing in guest artists from different bands in different towns. So this past month I was in Florida, San Francisco, LA, different parts of California, New Orleans, and Denver. Now being from Indiana, that doesn't happen very much. But I was able to use different players in each one of those different cities who could help me bring people to the venue. So it's kind of, that became my approach to touring in different areas. Because it's very hard. You go out to different cities and you expect people to know you. Well, if we all went to, let's just say New Orleans, how many people do you know in New Orleans? So you can't just expect to get a gig in a different city if you don't have anyone coming out. Now, there's different ways of tackling that, but you have to at least have a plan. You can't just think, all right, we're going on tour, and then everything's fine, because it won't be.
I'd like to ask that same question to a normal band. How does that go about? How do you guys go about your region and how far you go and then how far you come back and then, you know, how you attack the people in the areas and stuff like that?
Well, so as Joe said, he sort of did hack the system there. I'm not sure if that makes his job somewhat easier or significantly harder. I imagine it being more the latter. And you know, right off the bat, when you're starting a band that is thinking about doing things like going beyond playing in your local town, in your local bar for your friends. You're thinking about hitting the road, doing stuff like that. First of all, you got to make sure that you're with the right people that have the same priorities as you, people that are willing to make the same sacrifices, individuals just as crazy. And so Joe just found crazy people everywhere, as opposed to trying to get a core group of guys from one place to be crazy together, which, like I said, might be another task all over in itself. But when it comes to us for that, we kind of hit the ground running right away, but we definitely learned very quickly what not to do and where not to go. And we definitely learned quickly that when you're on the road, you need to know why you're on the road. There's so many bands that hit the road, and I don't think they really have any clue. If you really ask them for a hard answer, they wouldn't be able to give you one as to why they're doing it. It's just what you do. And I can understand that, because that's exactly the mindset we had in our first year or so of doing this. And we weren't completely green to it, but we definitely bumped into some walls and tried some things that didn't work. As far as hitting new markets, going too far from home is where it gets more and more difficult. If we're trying to, for instance, we were playing at a festival in Massachusetts a couple of summers ago, and we hadn't been, further in that direction than Pennsylvania, so we were just cold calling and, trying to figure out stuff on the way there. And so that's kind of not the best example of, finding a smart, close market. But what we have done well with is, we're from McHenry, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. So we would branch out to places, that were within a 100-mile spread of there, pretty much. Something where you could go out and maybe, kind of get your ass handed to you, and maybe things don't go so well, and the risk factor is a little bit lower. You can go home and, lick your wounds and try it again. And eventually, as Joe is saying, you hit a town, you hit it again, you hit it again. Obviously, everyone knows that the more you do something, you build up your presence in a city. But on the other end of that, there's smart touring. On some days I say, let's let our touring agenda be like a stain on a cloth. Let's let it, start in one spot and bleed out very slowly, and not be going, in crazy directions all the time. And we don't always stick with that, but we certainly try to. And I suppose the opposite of having an organically built presence in any certain market or city, the opposite of that would be a completely new place far away where you're simply cold calling or going off of, friends of friends and things like that. And that's kind of another job in itself. And the cold calling and, emailing venues in general, I suppose, that goes back to what Kate was saying about there's definitely a certain etiquette for what you want to do with that sort of thing. And it is very easy as you're contacting venues for them to overlook you. Give them a reason. Like they were saying, I book for a music festival and for a venue, and I have the same thing as Kate. If someone gives you your life story, and there's just too many things, it's just a lot. It's just word vomit in front of you. It makes you less likely to zero in on the real information there. And as far as booking us, I've had really good luck with the less and less that I put into these. I used to, write a small pamphlet practically for the emails we'd send out. And then as time goes on, I've come to learn that you keep it short and sweet. You say who you are, where you're from, and what you want, and kind of go from there.
And maybe a hit list of big shows that you've played over the last couple of years.
Certainly, yeah. Thank you. You definitely want to have we've done this, we've done that, but don't over embellish, because as soon as you're grabbing at straws, if you've done 3 notable things and you try to stretch that list out to 10, it's going to start to look pretty watered down. So get to the point, be honest about who you are. Don't try to oversell yourself, because your craft speaks for itself eventually.
Another thing to add to that too, especially when whether you're close to home or not, is the more specific you are and when you want to play, the better. Like give the clubs a couple of options. Like, we're open these 6 to 8 dates.
Yes.
And that gives them a frame of reference to actually look and see what they have on the calendar. If you leave it open-ended and just say, I'll play for you anytime, well then it's not like urgent for me to like look and see when I could fit you in. You know what I mean? Like if you give some options, and then even if they come back and say, well, we don't have anything, we're already booked, you still follow up with, well, we're more than welcome to be open to supporting this artist, like an artist that fits for us. That's a good follow-up. No, still nothing. Great. Well, keep us in mind, and if you don't mind, I'll follow up with you in another couple months and see if there's something else.
And also, don't be looking for a gig 2 weeks down the road, especially at a place like this. 2-3 months is the minimum that you want to be looking at out.
Excellent. With all the festivals that are moving around everywhere, I mean, you have local small festivals, you have big festivals everywhere. Usually what's happening is you start in some small bars or something, you build yourself up into some clubs, and then you're doing some festivals in some areas. And then at that time, you can kind of build yourself up into some bigger stuff. Anyway, I wanted to kind of move through maybe a little bit of a festival movement, just because when you go to a club, you kind of there, you hang out for a while, you sound check, you do your thing. What happens, let's just say, if you guys want to go through a day when you show up at summer camp or Bonnaroo or something like that, if you guys want to.
Yeah, real quick, can I just jump in?
Sure.
So kind of what they were saying about bugging the venues and festivals, I kind of have a little story about that. So there was a festival in Florida called Wani that was put on by the Allman Brothers. A relatively big festival, not on the level of a Bonnaroo, but slightly below there. And for years, I always loved the lineups and wanted to play it. So I'd dig around and try to find out on the internet the email address for one of the bookers. And I believe I emailed her 7 years in a row, and I always got the same response. Oh, no, thanks. And it makes sense. Being from Indiana, how am I bringing any value to a festival in Florida? It doesn't make sense. So eventually, I want to say 5 years ago, I started to play down there. So then all of a sudden, I had some value to bring to them, and eventually, I actually finally got booked onto the festival. So that's one of the things you have to be real about. You just see Bonnaroo, oh, that's a great festival. Well, if you're not playing in their market, they're probably not going to be as in tune with who you are because you're not in the area. I feel like I'm talking from your point of view real quick. But one of the things is you do have to be persistent about it, and I think that's the biggest lesson. And it's funny that you said about don't try to book 2 weeks out, because there's a venue in Indianapolis called the Mousetrap. And when I started playing with Fresh Hops, that was the venue we wanted to get into. And I would bug the crap out of them all the time, always asking. And when you're a new band, a lot of times they don't know who you are, so they're not going to give you a chance. But the reason I bring this up is because there just happened to be a day, I believe it was on Facebook, Mike, the guy who books there, said, hey, we had a band cancel on Friday. Who can make it? And sometimes, just having that little sliver of, okay, we're free on Friday. We finally got into the venue because I've been bugging this guy. I'm on his radar, and now you've got your chance. So a lot of it is just being persistent, and you don't want to do it too much, but following up and being on them about, hey, this is who we are. If there's ever an opportunity, and if you stick with it long enough, you're going to find your little window to slide in. I know that wasn't part of your question, Al, but it's part of the previous one.
Could I add on that, Joe?
No, that's good.
I think there's a little bit of a fine line between following up and showing your persistence, and then and being a bit of a psycho. Yeah. When I started booking bands, it was at a very small bar, not too far from the place I work at now. But I was new at it, so if the answer was no for a band, I would actually email them back and tell them no, which I learned pretty quickly was just going to eat at my soul if I did too long, because they want to know why. Feelings are definitely hurt there. So I kind of adopted the attitude of okay, a non-respond is a very soft no. And not everyone gets that, I've learned. And there's the persistence, but then there's definitely groups where I decided, either they weren't the right type of genre for the venue I'm working with, or, there could be a dozen reasons a booker decides not to work with you, and so most of them aren't going to be because they don't like what you're doing. There's a myriad of other reasons, but I've not quite as colorful as the one Kate was reading us, but I've had some pretty aggressive, rude responses. And what's really funny about those ones is I'm like, did you think that this was going to change my mind? Like you're gonna verbally abuse me, and I'd be like, okay, you're right. Yeah. So persistence and definitely following up. but give them their space. And I don't know, sometimes taking the hint and moving on, you know, there's always other rooms.
Getting back to your original question
Sure.
about festival etiquette and
Yeah.
and to that, you know, there's definitely a checklist that at least the three of us go through without even really talking about it. We usually try to not show up until about no less than 2 hours before, but no more than like 4 hours before our set.
About the same amount of time that we would be coming in and loading in at a venue. Spending the whole weekend there might not be the best thing all the time.
Yeah, you can get sidetracked. That's as far as we'll go with that.
You get tired. Let's just say tired.
You know, making sure that you know where merchandise sales are happening, where you need to load in, talk to the stage manager that whatever stage you're on. Those things are really important to do as soon as you get to the spot, and then as soon as you're loaded in and ready to go, you know, it's the more time you get to relax and write a set list and just get ready for the show mentally.
What about getting ready for the show when you're at a festival, sound checking, all that stuff? When you're not the big dogs, what happens when you're getting involved in that stuff?
The smaller a dog you are, the less time you have for it. So be a well-behaved dog. Because if you're not, all the crew at the festival will talk to each other when they're decompressing after the weekend, and it'll get brought up, you know. Oh, Miles Over Mountains, you know, went 5 minutes over their changeover time, or this like it seems inconsequential, but it gets talked about. And over at the Summer Stomp Music Festival in Illinois, where I work and book at, the fellas here help me out. They run one of our stages, and you know, if we had prepared this part, I'd be like, hey, which bands do you remember from last year that, you know, were acted unprofessionally or, you know, inconvenienced someone else? You know, you remember those things, and like I said, they do get brought up later.
It's a little bit like the emails. You want to make sure you stay polite and professional when you're at those things, because they're almost like auditions to keep growing and get better sets at those festivals, to see more people see you, and then you get to play at the bars in town that are bigger and better, and more people get to see you. So it's just a stepping stone. So
Yeah, folks they're not just paying attention when you're on stage. They'll watch other things. So
Yeah, punctuality, you know, being polite to the production staff, those things are just as important as your performance in some cases.
Yeah, like in most industries, I imagine, but this one in particular, everyone talks to each other across all boards. So if there's a story lingering about you, about a way that you behaved maybe unprofessionally, that story is eventually going to get around, and people might think twice about booking you again if it was unfavorably. And just the opposite, if you are super polite and courteous to the staff and the crews that you're working with, that also gets back to the people that help make those decisions and, you know, encourages, you know, a booker like me to book you again. You know, doesn't happen often. Most people are very nice. There's a few jerks in this world, but, you know, I hear about them, and then our staff says they were rude and they were, you know, not on time and all this stuff, and I'm like, done. We don't have to book them again, you know? So it goes a long way, and it goes across, especially in the festival world and people that tour around a lot, that stuff cycles through. So just always another reason to just always be kind.
I was just going to add on to the festival thing. Made me think about what we were talking about with how you go about booking your act or your group, and what I found is that it comes with it's the venues first. The festivals will much more likely look at you if you've got your rap sheet of your venues of where you've been. So if you're trying to just hop into something cold with your band that's 3 months old, this might not be the year for you to be trying to hit up these music festivals, which some of them are kind of the big cheese that we all wait for all year, but they're not really looking at you if you haven't proven yourself to some degree, you know, cutting your teeth in the bars and venue circuit.
Yeah, totally. And I think the networking is the name of the game for booking and everything. Because even if you're not getting a gig out of it, you're getting the connection. And the connection might lead you to another gig. Like, so say you become, or at least you know who Kate is, and you say hi and are friendly with her and maybe ask questions. She might not have a gig for you here because the Redstone Room's a bigger room, but she might be able to recommend you to some place which would be a good fit. And then if you have a good show there, then you could maybe the next time come back here. Same thing with Sean. Like, I'm sure probably every band that's played SummerStomp has played Mackey's first, I would think.
In most cases, yes, that would be it. But sometimes we'll have a larger band. One or two of the headliners maybe won't have been through the bar before. But generally, that's kind of the litmus test and kind of proves their worth in our local market.
Right, big time. So if you're a local band or even a touring band, maybe the goal is to get into Mackey's before it would be to play SummerStomp, because that's going to help you, grow.
I feel like
into
that
the
illustrates my venues before festivals thing that I'm saying there, And then you're talking about the networking. That goes right back to what we're saying about don't be a jerk and be professional,
Well,
Look at Joe. Hang it. Sorry. Go
One
ahead.
thing I wanted to add to that too is if you're trying to tour and play in different cities, one good thing that you can do is try and find similar bands to yourself and try and link up with them. Opening for these bigger bands, sometimes it doesn't pay as good, but to play in front of a bigger crowd, with music that's like yours is definitely one of the good things you can do to increase your crowds in different cities and stuff. So
Yeah, big time. And then the other thing everyone always talks about is playing for exposure. You don't want to play for free for a venue or somewhere, but sometimes the exposure does help. And so you got to know where you are at on your journey to draw that line.
But Joe, people can die from exposure.
It's like me and you in the sun.
Yeah.
But I knew when I was starting out with my band and bringing in these different guest artists, I know a lot of the times I was either not going to make any money or a lot of times lose money. And you have to be okay with that if that's what you're in it for. So that's afforded me the luxury of networking with so many different musicians and getting to play with different players, and you slowly work your way up the ladder. Now, as a band, it's different because it's not just one person who has to worry about losing, it's everybody. And when you're in your early 20s, maybe that's the time to go out and hit the road, but as you get a little older and you have financial responsibilities, you can't say, hey, we're going to go out on tour for 2 weeks and come home with $50. It doesn't quite work that way. But if you all were in a position to where you could do that, you could really hit the road harder and that way network more. So you have to, I think the hardest thing is define what you're looking for in your journey. Are we just trying to play as many gigs as possible? Are we just trying to make as much money as possible? Are we trying to play all over? Or just play in your home market? There's a lot of things that you don't want to think about that might help you have more successful gigs.
well, it helps to have something to sell out there too. If you invest in making a CD, even T-shirts, stickers, koozies, anything that you can sell to people on the road, it really helps. Put gas in the tank, get you a hotel for the night. If
Touring
you can
without
afford to
merch
do
is
it.
not advisable.
And
No, not
koozies
at all.
koozies are awesome for advertising.
Also,
because-
it helps people remember who you are, and next time you come to town, they remember that shirt that they got or that CD that they got that they enjoyed, and they're likely to come back to your gig.
I think what Joe was saying a minute ago kind of goes back to what I said earlier about like if you're trying to hit the road and go out of your town, heck, even by 30 miles, like know why you're doing it. I have so many emails from bands that get aggressive, like Kate and I were talking about, and they'll be like, oh, let's say a band from Miami were to hit me up, and I'd be like, sure, you guys sound great, and I offer them whatever I might offer them. They say, well, hey, in our town we get $2,000, and I'm like, okay, great, stay home and make $2,000. Good for you. I hope you do. I want all the bands to make money. But so sometimes people don't seem to understand why they're on the road, and you have to be making those sacrifices. And if you have this bottom line, then maybe you need to reassess how important it is for you to be spreading out so far from home.
And there's plenty of bands that just play in their home market or maybe an hour within their market that make a living doing it. And that's totally cool.
Yeah.
So part of it is knowing where you are in your journey. What was I just going to say? I was just thinking, so I got my buddy Chris Lone over there as the bass player. Raise your hand, Chris. He's playing bass with me tonight. And we were talking about it driving up here, how important it is to go out after your set and meet the audience and have FaceTime with the crowd. And it's taken me a long time. I still don't feel totally comfortable with it, but we're musicians. We're on stage. We have to be friendly, and that makes an impact. That's how you can make that connection And you meet these people and learn who they are and care about them so that when they come back, you want to tell your friends. And I think a lot of bands go into the shell after the stage part is done, where it's like, no, go out in the crowd and meet everyone. If you're in a band, that's almost as or more important than playing the gig, because you have to make those connections. There's very few bands that their performance blows you away and then you want to follow them the rest of your life. But you're going to remember that time you went and did a beer bong with the band after the show. Like, those are lifetime memories and making those moments. So I think that's really important and something to consider as well.
Yeah, just to add to that too, and like knowing what you're worth, I think is really good. But another maybe don't right away in an initial email is say like, our fee is X amount of dollars. Because it's just off-putting to say it like right up front, like, we need $1,200 to play. It's like, well, but you don't even know what I'm offering you yet. You know, but I do, but also, like, you don't always have to concede if you know what you need to be on the road. Say you've got 5 people and you need to make $50 each. There's nothing wrong with countering with what the venue's offering and say, I really try to get this because of this reason, you know, so each guy gets amount of money or whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's the negotiating is part of the game. And sometimes, you know, if it's like a band that, you know, again, like, you know, for a long time, like, I mean, both of you guys, like, we've worked together for a really long time, and sometimes it's like, you know, well, can you at least throw in like a meal buyout or X or a hotel room or something? And like, yeah, you know, we've worked together long enough. Like, yeah, you ask and you shall receive. Sometimes if I can do it, you know. But so like, there's a lot of negotiating power, but doing it the right way and not demanding it is also, you know, another etiquette thing. I
Getting
guess.
back to Caleb's point about hooking up with bands that, you know, are like-minded, the 2 previous times we've played here, at least since I've been in the band, we've been with 2 other string bands, Pert Near Sandstone and The Last Rebel, and they turned out to be great shows because of the, you know, just the how the 2 bands work together, and we were able to get exposed to their audience that was, you know, with them being a little bit farther along in their careers. And
Also, if you're playing with a local band, you know, you're going to a city and playing with a band that's from there, there's a chance you might be able to crash on their floor. And I said, you know, if you can get a free place to stay, you know, that helps on the road too, you know.
with us, it's easy. We can, you know, the 3 of us can stay in one hotel room, but if you're carrying 5 or 6 players, it turns into a lot bigger expense. So if you can make friends with the audience, like Joe was saying, or make friends with other bands in the bill that are locals, you know, you can save yourself $200-300 on hotel rooms a night if you can find a place to crash and be okay with sleep on the floor.
Excellent. We got about 15 minutes left. I think we're gonna maybe have some questions from the audience, and then if you guys, for some reason, don't have anything, they have tons of information that we can keep giving you. So if there's any questions, I'm gonna pass around this mic here. We want to raise their hand. If not, then I'm gonna do a little dance. I'll go back there to Jenny here.
Oh, thank goodness.
You can do the jig or something?
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave you hanging. So my question was specifically about strategy with a band that's booking a lot and going on tour a lot. When a venue responds back, what's your fee? How do you negotiate that response?
Ugh.
Right? Because you don't
that's-
want to tell them what your normal fee is if that's
You
far
don't want
above.
to scare them off.
Right.
You know, one thing I've always been afraid of there is that I will, and I've learned, I'm surprised at how little that does happen. I get a no, can we work with you on this? You know, they're usually flexible as opposed to, you know, refusing. But, you know, they'll be like, what do you need? You'd be like, what do you got? No, what do you need? And you kind of
Right.
do this passive-aggressive ping pong with them for a minute. And I play this game on both sides, so I've gotten pretty good with 2 paddles. But basically, neither side wants to show the other their cards. So basically, I try not to scare the venue, but then I also worry that maybe I'll make an agreement that comes in way under what I could have pulled off. You know, you never want to wish that you had asked for more. So,
Yeah, and there's a fine line in that too, because say my band is trying to get a gig at Mackey's, but also wants to do the festival. So if you're coming in saying, hey, I need top dollar for the venue show, that might scare you off for the festival, where if you can do a good show at the venue, you might get 2 gigs out of it, or you might get more out of it.
yeah, honestly, financial flexibility, I won't lie, it has definitely played a factor in certain bands getting booked or not getting booked, especially on the lower end of things. If it's a band, if it's a headliner, someone that everyone's heard of, and it's definitely going to help push tickets and stuff like that, that's a different story. But when you're dealing with bands that you'll see more on the middle or the lower end of a list on a festival poster, let's say, sometimes the willingness to come down a couple $100 or the willingness to be flexible in one direction or another is what made the difference in booking an unheard band over a different unheard band, and they got the opportunity that year.
I mean, I've heard some of Sean's stories of bands asking for very high numbers, and he's weaseled them down to less than half of it before. It's just.
I like that. I like that
Well,
verb you chose.
It's basically what it is a band asking for a very high price because if they get it, then great, good for them. But a venue's always going to try and muscle you down on it. Just kind of, if you ask for a ridiculous number, they're like, whoa, we were thinking, 20% of that. And sometimes they'll be like, okay, we'll take it.
All right, so weasel, ping pong, beer bong. Are you guys writing this down?
I guess to add on to that too, we do get requests for private gigs and stuff like that, and knowing how to negotiate with somebody that doesn't do this on a daily basis is a thing too, because some people will just come back, we throw them a number that's wherever, and they come back saying, we don't have this in our budget, thanks, we'll talk to somebody else. Instead of saying how much they have in their budget, they just immediately shoot us down.
I think that's the point too, and to specifically answer your question, I would always say right off the bat, what's your budget? And that kind of, either they're going to show you their hand or they're going to ask you, what are you looking for? And then I think if you get that answer, you can be honest with pretty much what you're looking for. Because then you're not overshooting, you're not going low. And always shoot high, you can always come down. Sometimes you might scare them off, but if you scare them off, maybe that's for a reason. And maybe that's a venue that you don't want to play or something that's not going to be worth your time.
Yeah, if a venue tells you that their budget's too low, then you can always just say, oh, sorry, no thanks, I'm looking for more. And that might be like, well, if we really want you.
I'd say I usually wall up a little bit at that question. They'll be, what's your budget? No. What's your price? And I volley it back. And we do that until somebody breaks.
Yeah, I mean, I find that very interesting because I never ask the bands that, like, how much do you cost? It's more like, I mean, I'm going to make the offer to you if I want you to play, and here's what I can do on this day. There's so many factors involved, what day of the week it is, time, season, all that kind of stuff. Like, how often have you played the market? There's so many factors that go into it. So, like, for me, like, I'm going to just make you an offer, and then you can come back and tell me if that's going to work or not. And, even we've done that a little bit. I think that a good middle balance, too, is if they're putting you back in that position and saying, what are you worth? Then, yeah, like, give them what you want, and then say, but if, maybe a nice, like, end tagline is, like, if that's not within your budget, though, then let us know, and we'll see where we can land in the middle or whatever. A great question.
Brett's got a question?
I'm going to intervene just so I can give these guys the microphone really quick. We just did a career day with some high school kids, middle school kids, and some college adults came through here, and you had an awesome question for me about publicizing your music. A publicist, being an original artist, what does that mean compared to just booking gigs? And ask your question.
Yeah, I had another question too about
What's your name?
Mason. If you're in a place where you literally have no idea of where any venues are at all, what's your strategy with finding venues? Do you just Google it, or what do you do to find?
There's a great resource on the internet called indieonthemove.com. It lists, as far as I found, every venue, pretty much every venue in the country. And then most of them have the names of the talent buyer or who to call or contact. So that was my Bible for a long
and
time.
it's all sourced too, so you can trust that those contacts are correct.
Yeah, a lot of times there's reviews too of bands that have played the venue. They'll say, hey, check this place out. But it's indie, INDIE, onthemove.com, one word. Cheap plug.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Sean, you got this?
no, go. You sounded like you were making some good points already. You said, well. I don't want to derail you.
Needing that anymore. It starts with content. You have to have really good content. If you've just got a little iPhone recording of your song, that's maybe not the best thing you want to publicize. So as a band, at least when you're starting, you want to get a full album's great, but even an EP, 3 or 4 songs where you really, your best stuff and the highest quality recording you can get. Because when you're going around to people you don't know, you don't want them to have to listen to some interference and there's sirens going off and toilets flushing in the background. You want the best, studio quality recordings of your stuff. Really good pictures, and if you can get some kind of press or someone to review your band, that's a good start with going out for promotion.
And if you're talking about copyright too, the Library of Congress will copyright, I think, an infinite number of tunes for $40 if you call it one catalog. So you can copyright all your stuff directly through the Library of Congress. To publicize your stuff, it's probably good to have your original material copyrighted as well, so you can retain the rights.
And if you're talking just generally about just making music and getting it out there, getting it heard, just wondering how the heck to, make the right ears listen to it so that you can go and, play a gig or whatever it is you're trying to do. We're very, very fortunate to live in this social media world. Like, to hear, Caleb and I work for an old rock and roller, and he tells us about his days driving around in the 70s, and I just don't understand how they used to book shows back then. I think they just had to wait by the phone and like mail tapes. The wax thing, pigeons. So, take advantage of the fact that you live in the
pigeons?
Yes.
Carrier pigeons. Sorry, the P's are really carrying up here. But we live in a time that is just unparalleled as far as the free or close to it opportunities that you have to get your stuff out there. Even at some silly phone recording. You want people to see it, give Facebook $25 and they'll make sure it goes out there. And
I think Kate had mentioned Spotify and Sonic Biz.
Yeah, well, it's just everything is right there, and I'd imagine that a lot of musicians that used to do this stuff, 20, 30 years ago, probably look at this now like, oh boy, you kids don't know how easy you got it, barefoot to school both ways or whatever.
And speaking of technology, if you don't think you can afford $3,000 to go into a studio, record your EP, you can buy equipment for about $1,500 if you have a working computer, and with just a little bit of a knowledge of the digital audio workstation, you can pretty much record your own material and get something that's more than halfway decent out of a recording at your own house.
I actually have a little handheld recorder that does a great job. It cost me $150. It's called a Zoom. Yeah. Zoom. Yeah, you can set it up in a room in a live setting, or at your house, anywhere really, and it's got decent microphones in it. Yeah, $150 investment right there. You can record your own stuff. And
We have a buddy Travis that put out an entire album just recorded on his iPhone, I believe.
on his iPhone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. iPhones are actually, Apple products have good microphones. They actually sound pretty decent. So.
If I could throw something on top of that, I don't know if Kate feels the same way, but from a booking point of view, if they send me a link for a recorded song and a link for a video, I always click on the video first.
Yeah, agreed. The cell phone videos of some fan that shot of you probably aren't the best ones, but something is better than nothing. And I get a lot, even when we have really big names come through, and a lot of local artists will submit their, hey, can I open for this person? The agents and their managers are all going to want to see sample. They don't know, it doesn't matter what my necessarily what my recommendation is. Like I could say like this is the best band in the Quad Cities, best fit. Doesn't matter. They want to review you too. So you got to have something for them to look at, or you know you're not going to just not have the opportunity.
And if you are able to hop on a festival, at least Summer Stomp does, what, 20, 30-minute recordings of each set or something like that on the main stages?
Just the ones we like.
Or just the ones you like? Okay.
We do. Not every festival will do that. We happen to do that for our own documentative purposes, so we can better promote our event in the future. And then the bands just kind of, as a fringe benefit, get those free videos. So that's just kind of a win-win.
Yeah, so if
That's
you're
an
able to-
amenity.
And locally speaking, if money is an issue for recording purposes for you guys, contact us at the RME. We've talked to a number of local studios in town that have offered to give really reasonable rates for local musicians to if they just need to record one song for that purpose. There's some great studios in town that are willing to work with all of you. So contact us and we'll put you in contact with them.
Yep.
Hey guys, my name's Bobby, and I think this panel is vital, and it's great for not only musicians but other performers as well. I perform live acoustic covers. I've played at the Redstone Room. I've worked with Kate. I've helped book comedy for the Alternating Currents Festival. I book for several bars and breweries and pubs in the Quad Cities, and everything you guys are saying is on point, and it translates into every other field of entertainment, right? So you guys are talking about being professional. That, to me, is one of the main things. Like, as performers, like, yeah, we sleep till noon and smoke pot and drink whiskey and sometimes play out of key, but the whole point is if you want to take this to another level, you have to be professional consistently. And when you realize that you want to do this for a living, you just got to be professional everywhere you go, whether it's your hometown bar where you know every single person in the audience, or it's a place you've never played before that's 1,000 miles away. You should treat every gig the same. And I like that you guys touched on that. You guys talked about building relationships, and I think it's as simple as get to know the staff at the place you played. Learn the bartenders' names. Remember the booker's name. You know, simple things like that go a long way. Tip. Every place I play, I tip the bar staff, whether it's $1, $2, $5. That to me goes a long way.
They will talk if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And then you guys were talking about living in a digital age with social media and things like that. If you're not learning that stuff on your own, I don't get it, right? Like if you're trying to tour and you're trying to get a following and you're trying to cold call places and you're not spending your downtime researching social media marketing and strategy, that's a huge part of being a performer nowadays. And then when you get to that point where you can hire an agency or hire somebody to do that for you, you know what your brand is and you already know what strategy you want them to implement, and then they can take it to a whole nother level. Because if you don't know who you are as a band, then who are you to cold call a place? Right? So the Redstone Room, they book bands for a reason. If you're a screaming death metal, hang from the ceiling on hooks band, you're probably not going to be a good fit here. But there are places in town that would be a good fit for you. So I just feel like as a band, know who you are before you start cold calling places and have your product in place. And like Kate said and like Joe said, have your links ready, videos, social media.
Totally, and you bring up a good point, right? So like, probably a very heavy metal band probably isn't gonna get asked to get a book gigged at like a winery, So, and I know it's hard, especially in new markets, to know where to look. Like you mentioned, Indie on the Move is good, or like even just basic things like you could Google in bands in town, the town that you want to play in, and look for that for this weekend, and they'll show you, where people playing, and from there you can kind of click through, figure out, well, that's kind of my vibe.
Or you look at the schedule of a band that's, maybe a couple steps ahead of you and take a look at the venues they're playing, That's another way to do it.
Yeah, look at the band that you think sounds most like you from Madison or a couple far cities away. Just kind of follow their trail. they will have left some crumbs.
You got another question?
People might like some specific related. You're talking about following up and emailing and stuff. In the same email thread or new email thread, when you follow up, and if it's a new email thread, how much information from the previous post do you include? And what is the time interval between your follow-ups?
You hit that one out of the park there.
So great. Okay. I would say initially, if you're talking, again, going back to like, you ideally want to have a specific time frame in mind that you're going after, right? Like, hey, I've got most of February free, you know, hey, I'm looking at mid-February, these dates look good. You know, if those don't work, hit me back in a couple of months. I think if you're initial contact and you maybe don't know the buyer yet, I think the same email thread is good. It kind of gives me a refresher of like, oh, that's right, they've already followed up. Here's what we discussed. I would say for your very first email, don't follow up with like earlier than a week, because sometimes weeks just get away from you, and if you're doing it like 2 days later, it's just too much. But you do want to like kick up to the front of their inbox after a week or two, maybe, especially if you have very specific routing in mind that you're trying to do. If it's more open and you're just like, hey, I'm going to try to hit DeKalb or Iowa City, I live in the Quad Cities, I'm kind of open for whatever. You know, a month, 6 weeks kind of thing, 2 months even is a good follow-up. Hey, I see that you have so-and-so coming. I'd be interested in opening for them. Throw them some options. But then, you know, on a different note, like I said, you don't want to keep the thread going way long, right? So like once you've maybe had 2 or 3 or 4 interactions in the same email thread, I think it's okay to like let it go for 2 months and then start a new one and say, hey, we're working on our spring tour. We're working on our winter tour. We've talked before, maybe not, you know, as a reminder, here's our links again. We're still very interested in playing your venue. And, you know, kind of circle it back that way. And then if maybe I didn't remember, I can still go search my emails and look back at our correspondence. Yeah?
Yeah, awesome.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Well, this is going to conclude the panel session. Give these guys a round of applause. Miles Over Mountain's going to take about a half an hour break here and get back up on stage and rock out some bluegrass for you. And really, any of these questions, even further, like agents, all that stuff, the RME is the place to answer all your questions. You can ask Kate anytime. Again, you can send her emails and flood her inbox full of shit asking her questions. So,
just one last thing.
Sure.
If this panel didn't answer enough questions, there's an awesome book that was published probably 10 years ago called Tour Smart that will definitely answer a lot more of your questions, and they have a really awesome strategy in that book.
Yeah, as much as you can research is going to be the best. We're going to real quick say thank you to Al, Kate, Miles Over Mountains, and all you guys. Thanks for coming out and supporting this place, because a lot of towns and cities don't have somewhere like the River Music Experience. This is a hub and a treasured resource. You have lessons, you have bands coming in all the time, students who are able to be involved. So support your local music community, because that's where it starts. Helping out, spreading the word about other bands that you know, and just showing up and supporting. That makes a big difference. And just kind of tie a couple things together. It is easier now more than ever to get your music out because there's so many channels and there's not as many gatekeepers, but there's a lot more competition. You have to deal with a lot more people doing the same thing. So just tell your story and be totally confident in what you're doing. That's the most important thing. This is why we do music, is we want to express something. So don't hold back. Tell your story. And that's what's going to really make it rise, because your conviction and confidence in it is going to want to bring other people into it. So just do your thing and have some fun.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.